Let's get started with our first news. Last week, Max Holloway made it absolutely clear that he has no intentions of ever returning to the featherweight division, and he didn't hold back. Speaking openly, he expressed his frustration with still being listed as the #1 contender at 145 pounds, despite repeatedly saying he's done with that weight class. In his own words, Max said, "I don't know what you guys are thinking, keeping me #1 contender there, that's kinda ridiculous. I'm not going back down to 45, I'm over it." Well, the message was finally received. After those strong comments, the UFC Rankings Committee has now taken action. As of today, Max Holloway has been officially removed from the featherweight rankings, and to many fans and analysts, this was a long overdue move. Holloway has been vocal for months about his desire to chase bigger opportunities, particularly in the lightweight division, and yet his name continued to sit at the top of a weight class he no longer wanted to compete in. This removal now brings clarity to the featherweight division. With Max out of the way, the rankings open up space for fresh contenders to climb and earn their shot. Poirier currently holds the featherweight crown, and the division is stacked with hungry, dangerous challengers. Guys like Arnold Allen, Movsar Evloev, and Bryce Mitchell all ready to step up. With Max no longer clogging the top of the list, the road is clearer for true title eliminators and fresh matchups that actually move the division forward. Fan reactions have been split. Some people felt that keeping Max ranked at 145 was a sign of respect for everything he's accomplished, a nod to his legendary status. Others felt it was just outdated, and that his name was taking up space that should have gone to active, committed featherweights. But regardless of where you stand, one thing is certain: Max Holloway will always be considered one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Rankings or not, that legacy is secure. More importantly, this change allows Max to fully focus on what lies ahead, and that's legacy-defining fights in other weight classes. Whether it's at lightweight or even welterweight down the road, Holloway has made it clear that he's chasing challenges. He's no longer interested in defending a status he's already proven. He wants big names, big moments, and bigger risks. This also shuts the door on any lingering talk of a fourth fight with Alexander Volkanovski, a matchup that, while competitive, felt unnecessary after 3 clear results. Now Holloway's career has a new direction, and fans are excited to see where it leads. So yes, while this decision from the UFC rankings team might feel like a small update, it actually represents something much bigger, a clear shift in Holloway's career and the opening of a new chapter for the featherweight division. Moving on to our second news item. Michael Bisping recently shared some strong thoughts on Dustin Poirier ahead of what could be the final fight of his career, and the pressure he's facing might be bigger than ever. This isn't just a fight, this is a full circle moment. It's happening in New Orleans, Poirier's hometown, and according to Bisping, the UFC is essentially building this event around him. That brings a lot more than just excitement, it brings expectations. On his YouTube channel, Bisping asked a very important question: is the motivation still there? It's a fair question. When a fighter knows this might be their last walk to the octagon, especially in front of a home crowd, it can be emotionally overwhelming. Bisping explained, "You're the local hero. Your friends and family, they're all in town. They all want to see you perform. That brings a ton of pressure, a ton of anxiety. I'm telling you right now, I've been there. Every time I fought in England, it was more stressful, but I was also undefeated in England. Why? Because you want to do the people justice. You want to make them proud, and that pushes you harder in the training camp." So while fighting in your hometown might sound like a dream, it's actually a double-edged sword. You don't want to disappoint. You don't want to come up short. And for Poirier, this may be the last time he ever competes inside the UFC octagon. That makes the stakes even higher. But Bisping didn't stop there. He also talked about Max Holloway's mentality going into this trilogy fight, and why this bout might mean just as much to him. Max doesn't want to lose 2 trilogies in his career, he said, and that's a huge point. Holloway already lost 3 in a row to Alexander Volkanovski. Now he's down 2 against Dustin Poirier. Losing a second trilogy would be a massive blow to his legacy. If Max beats Dustin, he instantly puts himself back in the conversation, Bisping said. Ilia Topuria is the champ right now. He'll probably fight someone like Justin Gaethje, Paddy Pimblett, or Arman Tsarukyan. But if Max gets a big win here and follows it up with another, he's right back in that elite tier. When it comes to style, this is a matchup made for the fans. They're both great strikers, Bisping explained. We're not going to see much wrestling. They're going to tutu, they're going to throw down. It's going to be absolutely sensational, tremendous, and it could be the final time we see Dustin Poirier compete. Bisping admitted that choosing a winner is incredibly difficult. Never doubt Poirier, but never doubt Holloway either. Yes, Max was just knocked out by Ilia Topuria. That could be a problem. It could have weakened his chin. Some guys are never the same after that. But it could also have lit a fire under him. He might be thinking, I'm coming to Louisiana to whoop some. Honestly, I don't know what's gonna happen. This fight is about legacy, emotion, and heart. Two fan favorites, one unforgettable moment, and maybe one final goodbye. Moving on to our next news. Tom Aspinall recently gave his take on the upcoming BMF title fight between Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier, and let's just say he's not a big fan of the belt itself. While he made it clear he respects both fighters and the magnitude of their matchup, he questioned whether the BMF title actually adds anything meaningful to the equation. Do you want my honest opinion? Tom said, I mean, it's a title, but it's not a world championship. So what are we really doing here? These guys don't need a title. They're two legends of the sport. Look at their name value. Look at the rankings. Look at the amount of fights they've had. Even look at the shorts they're wearing. We really don't need a title on the line, to be honest. This statement from Tom sparked plenty of conversation in the MMA world. His comments tapped into a long-standing debate about the BMF belt, a title originally introduced as a one-off fan-friendly concept back in 2019 for the fight between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. Since then, the UFC has occasionally brought it back for matchups that might not carry immediate title implications, but still promise fireworks and all-out wars between high-profile fighters. But for some, like Aspinall, the belt feels more symbolic than substantial. It's not sanctioned as a traditional championship. It doesn't follow the same contender structure, and there's no clear path of defenses or rankings tied to it. From Tom's perspective, this fight is already massive without needing any kind of extra prize. He's got a point. Both Holloway and Poirier are already established stars. They've headlined pay-per-views, fought in title bouts, and built fan bases that span the globe. Their legacies are already set in stone. When fighters of this caliber step into the cage, it's not about trinkets or promotional props, it's about pride, skill, and heart. Still, the BMF belt does serve a purpose for some fans. It adds a little extra sizzle, especially for casual viewers who may not follow divisional rankings or title eliminators. It's a simple concept. Two big-asses going to war, no belt politics involved. For the UFC, it's a marketing tool. For fans, it's entertainment. But for pure fighters like Tom Aspinall, that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is what happens inside the octagon. And in his view, this fight would be just as significant, just as exciting, even if there were no belt on the line. One thing is certain, Tom's respect for both Max and Dustin is undeniable. His comments weren't meant to diminish the fight. If anything, they elevated it. He sees this matchup as a legacy bout, not a belt bout. And in the end, that might be what makes it even more special. Moving on to the next update. Dana White has been forced to cancel the co-main event for UFC Abu Dhabi, and fans are definitely feeling the disappointment. The shakeup comes after Movsar Evloev was pulled from his highly anticipated matchup against Aaron Pico due to an injury or health condition that occurred during his training camp in Thailand. The news broke through Red Corner MMA, who reported that Evloev's withdrawal was connected to a health issue he developed while preparing for the bout. Specific details haven't been revealed yet, but it's serious enough to pull him off the card entirely, and that's a big deal. This fight wasn't just a filler, it was a high-stakes potential title eliminator bout that could have determined the next top featherweight contender. Both fighters were on strong trajectories, and fans were excited to see how the wrestling-heavy Evloev would handle the explosive power and athleticism of Pico. It had all the ingredients of a classic matchup, but now it's on hold. According to multiple sources, the UFC is currently looking into rescheduling the fight for the UFC 319 card in August. That timeline would give Evloev some space to recover, while still preserving the matchup, if Aaron Pico is willing to wait. That's a big if, considering how intense and momentum-driven Pico's career has been lately. Fighters don't always want to stall their progress, especially when they've got a shot at climbing into the title conversation. But things took an interesting twist shortly after the cancellation news came out. Said Yokub Kakramanov, a former UFC fighter, immediately stepped up and made his intentions clear. On social media, he wrote, "Give me Pico at 145. That simple sentence was enough to ignite a whole new round of buzz. For those unfamiliar, Kakramanov was controversially released from the UFC despite having shown flashes of real talent. Many fans and analysts believed he deserved to stay in the promotion. Since his release, he's been putting in work, racking up a 6-0 record across regional promotions. That includes 3 karate combat wins, 2 MMA victories, and a recent dirty boxing win over Alex Caceres, a fighter with legit UFC experience. In short, Kakramanov has stayed sharp, active, and hungry. Now the question is, will the UFC bring him back? There's certainly precedent for it. The organization has a long history of re-signing fighters on short notice, especially those who are willing to step in when cards start falling apart. Kakramanov checks all the boxes: experience, recent wins, fan support, and most importantly, he's ready. So while the cancellation of Evloev versus Pico is a letdown, the door might be opening for a surprise return and an unexpected twist in the featherweight division. Whether it's rebooked or reshuffled, one thing's for sure, this storyline is far from over. Now let's talk about another big update making waves in the MMA world. Joe Rogan will not be commentating at UFC 318, and yes, that's surprising, especially considering this is a pay-per-view event taking place in the United States where Rogan traditionally handles commentary duties. But this time, he'll be stepping away from the broadcast table. Instead, Paul Felder will be taking his place on the mic. The news was shared by Josh Thompson on social media, who hinted that Rogan might simply be choosing to attend the event as a fan rather than a commentator. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. This isn't just another UFC event, it's a historic moment, as Dustin Poirier is expected to have the final fight of his incredible career. Dustin Poirier isn't just a fan favorite, he's one of the most respected veterans in the sport, and someone Rogan has spoken very highly of for years. Add to that the fact that Poirier is close friends with comedian Theo Von, who's often seen hanging out with Rogan and other big names in the comedy and podcast world, and it becomes pretty clear this event isn't just about fighting, it's personal for Joe. There's a very real chance that Rogan simply wants to kick back, enjoy the show, and watch a close friend wrap up his journey inside the octagon without the pressure of calling the fight live. And really, who could blame him? It's also worth remembering that Joe Rogan has drastically scaled back his UFC schedule over the last few years. He's been very vocal about wanting to reduce travel, prioritize his podcast, focus on stand-up comedy, and spend more time at home. These days, he mostly covers US-based pay-per-view events, and even then, it's not always a guarantee. That said, his absence from UFC 318 isn't necessarily a negative. While Rogan is an iconic voice in the UFC, someone fans associate with major moments, Paul Felder is no stranger to the broadcast booth. He's knowledgeable, passionate, and brings a fresh energy to the desk. And with a fight card this stacked, fans are still in for a high-quality viewing experience. But let's be real, even if Rogan's not on commentary, there's no doubt he'll be watching closely. Whether he's in the crowd or tuned in from a private suite, you can be sure he won't miss a single second of Poirier's final appearance. For many, Rogan not being on the mic will feel strange, a reminder that this era of UFC is slowly evolving. But sometimes, stepping back just means appreciating the sport from a different angle. And on a night like UFC 318, that's completely understandable. Finally, let's talk about one of the more disappointing developments in the lead up to UFC 318. Movsar Evloev has officially pulled out of his scheduled bout with Aaron Pico. This highly anticipated matchup took a major hit when reports confirmed that Evloev had withdrawn due to an injury or health condition suffered during his training camp in Thailand. While the exact nature of the issue hasn't been publicly disclosed, it's clear that it was serious enough to force him off the card entirely. This is not the first time Evloev has had to pull out of a fight. In fact, this marks the 11th fight cancellation in his UFC career. Out of those 11 cancellations, 3 were because of Evloev himself, while the remaining 8 were the result of opponent injuries, visa issues, or other unforeseen complications. Either way, it's an incredibly frustrating stat for a fighter who has consistently shown world-class potential, but hasn't been able to stay active consistently enough to climb the rankings. It's not just a tough break for Evloev though. Aaron Pico has been training relentlessly, hoping to secure a career-defining victory against a highly ranked UFC contender. This was supposed to be his moment, a shot at proving he belongs among the elite at featherweight. A win here could have launched him into the title conversation, especially with the division going through some big shifts right now. Let's not forget, Max Holloway was just removed from the featherweight rankings, officially stepping away from the division. And with Ilia Topuria currently holding the title and looking for fresh challengers, this fight between Evloev and Pico carried real implications. It wasn't just a test for two promising fighters, it could have been a launchpad toward a title shot later this year. As of now, the UFC hasn't made an official decision about what's next. There's talk that the promotion might attempt to rebook the fight in August, possibly for UFC 319, depending on Evloev's recovery timeline and Pico's availability. That option would preserve the matchup, which fans were genuinely excited for, but it also requires patience from both fighters. Alternatively, if Pico isn't willing to wait, the UFC might choose to slot in a new opponent, especially given how active and determined he's been lately. Whether it's a replacement bout or a rescheduled date, fans are hoping to see Pico back in action soon, and Evloev returning when fully healthy. This is yet another reminder of how unpredictable the sport can be. Fights that seem locked in can disappear overnight. Still, the featherweight division remains one of the most stacked and intriguing in the UFC. With so much talent ready to break through, even setbacks like this only delay the excitement, they don't stop it. And that wraps up today's news. Stay locked in for updates on this story and more as we get closer to a massive weekend of fights. Ask ChatGPT.